You're listening to the Balanced Educator Podcast, episode number 129. Welcome to the Balanced Educator. We're your hosts, Kaylee
and Josiane from EduCalm. Our intention is to equip and empower you to feel more calm, balanced, and joyful in all aspects of your life.
Hello there and welcome. We are so happy to have you here with us today. So, have you ever reacted to your child's or your student's behavior in the heat of the moment and then wished you would have handled the situation differently? In this episode, we're interviewing Hunter Clarke-Fields, host of the Mindful Mama podcast and author of the book Raising Good Humans, about mindful parenting. Hunter shares how she transformed her reactive parenting style, which was leading to more conflicts and tantrums, to mindful parenting, which created more peace in her family. She talks about how to cultivate a mindfulness practice as a parent and how it leads to more skillful interactions with your children. Hunter shares how to be okay with making mistakes as a parent and how self-compassion actually leads to growth. And she coaches on how to handle big emotions and tantrums more effectively with less stress and judgment. Finally, Hunter gives expert advice on managing conflicts between siblings. So whether you're a parent, an educator, or both, this conversation will help you to interact with children with less conflict and more grace. Before we jump into this episode, we're happy to share this week's sponsor, Pockets Change. Pockets Change is building financial resilience through hip-hop pedagogy. If you aren't sure what that means, you have to listen to our episode number 120 called Teaching Financial Wellbeing, where we interviewed one of the founders of Pockets Change, Andrea Ferrero, and she taught us that finance education is more than just numbers. It's actually a tool for self-care and social justice. Pockets Change provides workshops, curriculum, and professional development where students, parents, and educators develop an understanding of their personal relationship with money, and they learn new ways of thinking and talking about money, and they develop the skills to take action and to advocate for themselves and others. So I've used their curriculum in my classroom, and I just really love how their lessons make talking and teaching about money feel easy. Sometimes money can feel kind of like a touchy subject, but they really remove kind of those barriers and those stigmas of there's one right way and really focus on what's right for you. So it's like this practice of self-care and well-being through learning about your finances, which I love. So you can find your flow with finance and discover how hip-hop pedagogy can bring money to life in your classroom at pocketschange.com/hip-hop-finance. So again, that's pocketschange.com/hip-hop-finance. Now, they also have an event coming up on April 8th, 2021. So you can save the date and join Pockets Change for a hip hop finance fest where students, artists, and educators will come together to learn about money through performance. So you can check that out at spondulix.org/events/hip-hop. So that's spelled spondulix.org/events/hip-hop. We'll link to both of these URLs in our show notes, so if you weren't able to remember them, just check the show notes at the end of this episode. All right, enjoy this interview. Hello there, Hunter. Thank you so much for joining us on the Balanced Educator Podcast.
I'm happy to be here, Kaylee.
We are so excited to have you here because many of our listeners are parents, but since Josiane and I aren't parents ourselves yet, we don't talk about parenting on the show, but we are excited to have you on the show to share your expertise in parenting for those that are parents. And even though if our listener might not be a parent, I think a lot of what you share in your book, Raising Good Humans, is really useful for teachers to understand how they can better respond to students in their classroom as well. So let's start off with, can you introduce yourself to our audience?
Sure. I'm Hunter Clarke-Fields. I am host of the Mindful Mama podcast and author of Raising Good Humans, and I'm the creator of the Mindful Parenting course and membership. And I help smart, thoughtful parents create stronger relationships. The work that I do really stems from my own journey, which we can talk about, but really it comes, what I really am very interested in doing is bringing together the inner work of the mindfulness skills, self-compassion, understanding, just developing our own self-awareness in a greater extent with those communication skills that most of us weren't taught from our own parents. At least I wasn't, for sure. And really bringing those together. So for the secret of, sometimes my mindful parenting members, they often tell me like, oh, my relationship with my partner has improved in all these different ways, because they really are these sort of universal tools. So I think there will be a lot for anyone who may not be in the parenting to get from that.
That is so true. These mindful practices really are universal tools. They're things that help us respond in all areas of our life. And I think the way that you've curated in your book, Raising Good Humans, the set of sort of steps to follow is very useful for anyone. There's a lot of things that I read in the book where I was like, ooh, this would be helpful in how I communicate with my partner. Oh, this would be helpful in the classroom with my younger students, or that I could use this slightly differently with the older students. So my next question then is, how did life lead you to become the mindful mama and to write this book, Raising Good Humans?
I mean, it basically comes out of what I kind of saw as my worst failure, as what I was really bad at. So I really get that it's so hard. I mean, I really understand. I'm not a natural kid person. I wasn't super natural at parenting. And in fact, I was just really triggered by my kids. I was really activated by my daughter, and my temper was really, really activated. I had this really, badass temper that came out when my daughter was started walking and talking back to me. And so I was frustrated. I was really, I was really frustrated because I started to learn these skills and tools. I started to learn from people who teach these wonderful things, and they, a lot of it was respond this way. There's these wonderful ways to respond to it, but I was really frustrated because I couldn't do that when I was so, when I had so much stress, when I was so activated and reactive. I just couldn't access. And then I found out, later about the neuroscience and stuff behind it. I literally couldn't access those areas of the brain. So this work really comes from my own struggles and journeys. Mindfulness was a huge, mindfulness meditation was a huge game changer for me. And then to bring these two together, I mean, it really was very, very selfishly was for me first. And then I started to started to share some of the different tools with some friends and be like, hey, listen, I've been doing this with Maggie lately. And then, is this working for you too? Okay. And then we started to grow from there as I started to share it, and share my struggles on the blog and then the podcast. So, and then, bringing together these tools to share with more people. And now it's cool. I've been able to share it with hundreds of families and now with the book, so many more. So it's exciting.
That's really cool. What really stood out to me when I was reading your book is that it seemed different from what I expected from a parenting book, whereas I expected a parenting book to say, when your kid does this, you should do that. Or when your kid doesn't do this, you should do this instead, kind of like what you explained, that it was kind of a if this, then that. You take a very different approach, and you don't actually go into that much detail. There are definitely some examples that you give of how to respond in certain situations, especially when it comes to conflict resolution, which I found very interesting. But you really take an approach of becoming a mindful parent and practicing specific mindfulness practices and reflection activities and things like that to understand yourself better as a parent. So could you go into more detail about that? Why did you take that approach?
Sure. And so, so one thing that I found out that was so interesting was, because with those approaches, like, if this happens, then just do this. Like, what's funny is that, like, that new learning happens in the brain, and then, our biology just works against us. So our nervous system sees our child as a threat in a lot of situations, when they're acting up, and when we're in different situations, it's stressful. We start to feel our teeth, jaw gets tight, and we just need to act, and we feel all hot, and it's so frustrating. That stress response is happening, and that nervous system is basically registering our child as a threat. And then what's happening then in that moment is that it's literally like those reactive parts of the brain, like the amygdala is the seat of that stress response. It's literally like bypassing all the other parts of the brain. Like, you're literally not able to use your whole brain in those moments just so you can be reactive. Like, we evolved to have reactive parenting. But the problem is, like, when you learn, like, if then that, if you learn these new skills, you've got some new, that's all in this sort of like higher order thinking, verbal ability parts of the brain. And that's like precisely what you can't access. So it's as good as useless if you're not doing that work to kind of calm your nervous system. And that's, I'm sure you've talked about how mindfulness helps us do that in so many ways to, these habits that steady the heart, the mind, and the nervous system. Understanding then also, like, kind of, so that inner, that, body awareness, that awareness of what's happening in the moment, but also that awareness of our own history, right? And our own, you're back in this parent-child relationship. You might be repeating some patterns that came up with your own childhood. Like, I've had a student who, in mindful parenting, and she said, like, my child was like spilling orange juice on the floor. And I was like, she was so enraged by this. It was like much bigger. Her reaction to it was much bigger than that situation actually warranted. You might say, okay, let's just get a sponge and this is how you clean up orange juice. But her internal reaction to that was huge. And it was because of childhood stuff. It was because of, as she started to develop her own personal awareness of her own history and those patterns that tend to repeat, like, yes, she was taught that everything had to be, her house had to be perfect and look good. And that was a measure of her value as a human being. And so that was a lot of stuff. A lot of baggage she was bringing to that. And so we can't start to address any of that until we make it conscious. So we have to make that a conscious. We have to develop that awareness in the moment, and then that larger awareness. And then all that stuff is really hard, so we need a lot of self-compassion. And we also need some tools to be able to take care of the inevitable feelings that arise with that. Like, we can't just say to a parent, like, I can't just say to you, if you're a parent, like, when your child does this, respond this way. Like, you've got all this whole extraordinary experiences happening for you that may be negative and may be difficult. And so you need some tools to be able to take care of that too. So all that stuff comes before you're able to really, like, attend, like the Dalai Mama with your child. It's like, all that comes first.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And as you were explaining that, it made me think of one of the big things we teach to teachers about how to introduce mindfulness in the classroom is we always say, start with this new practice when your students are already calm. This isn't a tool, mindfulness strategies, mindful breathing, things like that aren't calming tools to use when the child is already in the stress response. They have to learn it when they're already calm so that they've ingrained those tools. They know how to use them when the situation presents itself, that they actually have to use it for a real life situation. And I think you're teaching the same thing to parents is we have to actually take the time to learn these calming strategies when it's easy so that we can implement it when it's hard, like when you have a toddler throwing a tantrum in the supermarket.
Yes, exactly. Like those difficult moments with our kids are like, it's like the big game, right? Like you need to show up with all your resources. And, you wouldn't send your child to the Little League World Series without ever having, sent her to a practice and had her learn some skills and just like get a little muscle memory behind that swing. Like you'd never, ever do that, right? Yet, we expect ourselves to do that. We expect ourselves to like be in this incredibly challenging situation with zero practice, zero muscle memory. Like we have way outsized belief in our own willpower, which is, it's like a little unfortunate, right? Like we just think we can decide something, and deciding something is a really important step and is helpful along the way. But you can't give what you do not have. You can't use a muscle that you haven't developed. You can't just decide to do that thing. You have to practice, and then what we practice grows stronger. It grows stronger. We're shaping and changing the brain as we practice these new tools, which is so cool.
Yeah. And you said in your book too, because at the end of each chapter, you give specific practices that parents are supposed to practice throughout the next week, mindfulness practices and reflection practices. And you even say in there, don't skip over this part, because just reading about tennis isn't going to make you a good tennis player. Just reading about mindfulness isn't going to make you mindful. You have to actually just sit and do the exercise, which requires some commitment, but I think has payoff in the end.
For sure. Yeah, I know. It's kind of funny because like, I know how hard it is for us. It's like, I know that the book is for some of us is going to like, some people are going to take it and be like, yes, and go with all the things. And for some of us, it can be really hard to like, oh, now I have all these ideas from the book, but we need like the support of other people or a community or, a coach and all those different things. So it can be hard, but hopefully it's at least a step one.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I like that you had really specific practices that weren't overwhelming. You started with like 5-minute mindfulness practice and do this one journaling exercise, things like that. It did not seem overwhelming. It seemed actionable, although, what you wrote was interesting. So it's like, I want to read on, but, pause, do the practice before moving forward. So you shared lots of great mindfulness practices. What would you recommend to a parent that is just starting out on their mindfulness journey and they're recognizing that, they're having some struggles with parenting, they're reacting in ways that they don't love and that they want to start practicing mindfulness? What would be the first practice you would recommend that they do?
Well, I think that there's a lot of wonderful ways to start mindfulness. But, I think what I guess I would offer them first is to just decide that you have time to do it. It doesn't take a lot of time. You have 5 minutes to spend scrolling on Instagram, I guarantee it. So if you have those 5 minutes for social media, you have 5 minutes that you can do for this practice. And 5 minutes can make an extraordinary difference. So that's what I would say first, is that decide that you have the time. Don't let your brain tell you that story, that limiting story of I don't have enough time, because you can do it. And also, like, don't let your brain tell you the limiting story of like, I can't do it, because really anybody can, and you're not supposed to like be clearing your mind and have a blissful, silent, like experience where like angelic voices are singing and sparkles are shooting out of your ears. Like, that's not going to happen. So just get a little realistic about what's real, right? Make a decision. And yeah, I think that, it's interesting as far as a beginning mindfulness practice, because I actually really believe in like having some formal meditation in the day, even if it's a really short amount of time, because there's so many ways you can practice being in the present moment. You can practice with washing the dishes and being with your child. You can use your child as an object of mindfulness, right? Like to be really present with your child. And those are all wonderful. And those are ultimately the goal. But if we don't have some kind of formal practice where this is the time, this is the space where I am practicing to bring my attention back to the present moment again and again, those 5 bazillion times, then we're going to forget all those other times, right? We're going to forget all those informal times. So I really like a sitting practice. I think that's doable for way more people than they think it's doable for. You know, some of us, like, I think if you're falling asleep, then maybe a walking practice might be like might be good, like a walking practice. But some kind of formal time where you just say, you know, could even be like, I sit at the edge of my bed, I set the timer on my phone for 3 minutes, I sit there. Or I really encourage starting with a guided meditation, so you have the words of a teacher in your ear, and just commit, you know, see what works for you. Commit to a friend. I'm going to do this every day for the next 2 weeks. Can you hold me accountable? You know, like, and then reward yourself when you do that. Like, it's the kind of habit that's hard to get started. Like, we have a lot of aversion to sitting still. It's kind of like this weird brain hack. Like, human beings were not designed, like we were wired for survival. Like, we're not wired to sit still and quiet. Like, we're wired for action. But it is this kind of brain hack that brings all this well-being and peace and all the benefits. I'm sure you talk about a lot, Kaylee, but it is like we have a lot of resistance to it, like all humans do. Like, in fact, there was some study at a university where they put people in a room for 15 minutes and there was nothing to do there. They didn't tell them specifically to meditate, but there was nothing to do there except sit by themselves or sit by themselves and give themselves like electric shock like by touching a thing, and like 85% of them were shocking themselves. So
oh my gosh.
Just saying, like, it is like a little against the grain, just a wee bit, to like sit still in silence, but that's okay. The benefits are enormous, and once you get past like the first month or two, like, you're starting to see those benefits in your regular daily life, so much so that it really does build upon itself, but reward yourself in the beginning.
Yeah, recently I was having a hard time getting back into the habit of exercising regularly. Like, I go for my daily walks when I'm walking the dog, but I wanted to get back into more intense physical activity, but I just could not motivate myself. So my sister-in-law and I, we decided that we were both in the same boat. We were having a hard time motivating ourselves. So we decided that for a whole month, we would text each other every day what we did for a workout, and that our workout had to be 15 minutes or less. So we made it feel like a very small goal. And every time that we felt like, oh, I don't have time to do a 15-minute workout, or I don't have time to do a workout, I'd say, well, it's only 15 minutes. I have 15 minutes. So it was hard to say that I don't have the time for it. And then that fact of texting each other every day motivated both of us, and we stuck it through for the month. And now I feel like I have more ingrained habits, not perfect, but it feels a little bit more like I'm intrinsically motivated because I've seen the benefits of actually sticking to it. But sticking to a new routine is so hard. Like, I think we just have to acknowledge for everyone, it's hard to create a new routine. Our brain fights against us. So we just have to be okay with the fact that it's hard.
It is really hard. I mean, yeah, that's why I go back to like that idea of like the support of like a community and things like that. You know, it's like not really something we're meant, you know, we're so individualistic, like in at least Canada and the United States, and it really works against us at times. And it really, like, we think we should just be able to do everything on our own. And that's this kind of mistake, you know, and we, you know, when the mindful parenting membership, when people join, like, we have a community manager who says like, hey, do you want to meet up with somebody? You want an accountability buddy? Like, here, you know, like, Jenny, who's in your time zone, may also want one. Let's see if we can get you guys together. What do you think about texting? Right? Like, because we really want people to, like, that community support really, really matters. And to also like be around other people who are doing the same wacky sitting still and being quiet thing that you're doing, that makes a lot of difference to just know that there are others who are doing it too. It's very helpful.
That's so true. And I like that you suggested to listening to a guided mindfulness practice. That's actually feedback that I get every time I give a presentation for like a professional development workshop for teachers. And I guide them through a mindfulness practice. We have a discussion after, and every single time there's always someone that says, wow, that was so much easier to do when I was listening to you guide me than when I try to do it on my own. And yeah, it's hard to learn mindfulness on your own. I mean, I've been practicing mindfulness daily for years now, and I still most of the time listen to a guided mindfulness practice because it's just easier that way. It's easier to get into it, and you're hearing instructions from someone else's brain rather than instructions from your own brain. So, you know, just like you would have a coach teach you how to play a sport, have a mindfulness teacher coaching you through how to practice mindfulness is so much easier and helps you to progress a lot faster than if you were to try to, you know, learn basketball without anyone helping you.
Yeah, exactly. For sure.
So you share a lot in your book about or actually, I want to use this one quote because this really stood out to me. You said, how we talk to ourselves after our mistakes can shape whether we shrink or grow from the experience. What we say to ourselves in the privacy of our own thoughts really matters. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, this is so important, and it's so foundational. You know, we live in a very judgmental culture too. Like, we tend to be really hard on ourselves. It's, yeah, I think this is very much like a Western thing that, you know, we tend to like be very hard on ourselves. And a lot of parents come to me and they think like, oh, I can be really kind and responding to my kids, but I can just, you know, but inside I can be super mean and to myself, and that's fine. Like, I can love my kids and hate myself, and that just doesn't work. I'm sorry. You know, and there's research behind that, which is so interesting. When we have this like harsh, mean inner voice, first of all, it's got to come out at some point. Like, you're not going to like get through 18 years minimum of like living with your child and that they're not going to hear that mean, harsh inner voice in some way or another. I remember when I was young, my mom, of course, she had no intention of doing this. She's a wonderful person, but I remember she looked in the mirror and she told herself that she was so ugly. And that's what I did, you know, like that's what I did when I was in my early 20s and my late teens. I did the same exact thing. It wasn't, she didn't want to teach me that lesson, but that was just her inner voice that was coming out. And so it will come out one way or another. And plus, as we grow and learn and do things, as you do this like mindfulness stuff, as you say you learn some new communication skills or whatever, like, it's inevitable that you're going to mess up because you're human, right? Like, inevitably you're going to make a mistake and mess up. So if you respond to yourself in those moments with like a harsh, mean inner voice, like, what are you going to do? Like, you're going to shrink up and you feel terrible. You're not going to want to take those steps out of your comfort zone again to do something that's different and grow and change. But if you take those steps out of your comfort zone, you try something new, you inevitably are human and mess up, and you give yourself a soft landing. If you're kind to yourself, you're actually going to be able to then you recover more quickly and respond and start again and say, okay, didn't work out so well that time. There's a mistake there, but I can try again. And, you know, when we give ourselves that soft landing, the research shows that people who are self-compassionate are actually able to make changes, change habits, and do all those things in the world more easily than people who aren't. I mean, it just is like, and it just makes life a lot more pleasant. I have to say, too, on the other side of self-compassion, life is a lot more relaxed and pleasant when we're not all mean to ourselves.
No kidding. No kidding. And it really lends to that growth mindset as well, that like, it's okay that I made a mistake and now I have something to learn from. I have something to grow from, rather than I made a mistake and it's all over. But, you know, here's what not to do next time, or here's how I can change how I respond next time.
Yes.
So let's talk now about tantrums. You talk in your book about how your daughter had a lot of tantrums when she was young, and that seemed like a big catalyst to kind of your journey towards this mindful parenting sort of practice. I, as a child, had a lot of tantrums. My poor parents, they tell me these stories of how I had these huge tantrums, which is funny because now I'm I'm a very calm person. I grew into a calm person, but I just feel for them. And I literally have memories of some of the tantrums that I had. I can still remember them now, and I can look back and go, oh my gosh, my poor mother. I remember having a tantrum in a grocery store one time. And so as a parent, that's got to be the hardest thing. How do you coach parents through dealing with tantrums?
It is incredibly hard. And I was really triggered by my daughter's big feelings. And it was really interesting for me to think of, as I kind of did that work to figure that out, I realized that, when I had big feelings when I was a kid, my dad got really mad and upset at me, and he sent me this message that it's not okay to have these feelings. So lo and behold, then my daughter has these big feelings, and everything in my body is saying, this is unacceptable. This is unacceptable that she has this big feelings, where the truth is that every kid's going to have tantrums, and then tantrums are like a stress relief mechanism for kids almost. They're just, they don't have the resources, they haven't developed enough, we have tantrums too, frankly, but, it's like it's like an emotional storm, right, that they're having, and they can't help it. It's not like they're making a choice, sometimes there can be a thing that triggers them, and it is like I've had so much stress and I'm relieving it, right? So the truth is that their big feelings are nothing personal to you. They're not, you may feel embarrassed, but they're not the big feelings of a small child are not telling you that you're a bad person, you're not a bad parent. It may be embarrassing, but really what I want to point to here is that ultimately what we want to send our kids the message that it's okay for them to have the whole spectrum of their feelings, right? Not that they are wrong or bad for having their feelings. So they're allowed to be mad. They're allowed to be upset and all those different things. And if you get a child who's gotten to the point of having a tantrum on the floor of the grocery store, the truth is there's not really anything you could do about it either. You're not going to say some magic thing that's going to be your child's going to be like, oh, mother, thank you. I think I'll get up now and walk quietly out of the grocery store. That's not going to happen because there's not, they're beyond being able to even hear your words at that point. So our job there is to keep our child safe and to manage our emotions. And to recognize in ourselves that, embarrassment's going to arise, feeling upset, anger may arise. Underneath anger, there may be feelings of helplessness. All of those things may arise. And so our job in that moment is to keep our child safe and then to recognize our own feelings, notice what it feels like in the body, and be able to breathe and to be able to just, I'm sorry, my 14-year-old is just jumping outside my window in excitement over something, which I'm very excited. I have to give her the thumbs up or she's going to keep distracting me. Yay! Okay,
this is a perfect demonstration of real life parenting. I love it.
She's very happy about our new sweatshirt. So
oh, that's awesome. It's a perfect demonstration of, okay, maybe as the adult, you're like, this isn't the right time, but it's a good thing, bringing variety into your life.
She's making me laugh. I can't really fully get into the mindset of this tantrum at the store. It's totally fine. But yeah, it's so going back to I told you my father had sent me this message that wasn't okay for me to have those big feelings. If he had learned the skills to be able to take care of his own big feelings in those moments, then that message wouldn't have been passed on, right? And so a lot of the work that I talk about in Raising Good Humans and in mindful parenting that we do is it's like we're reparenting ourselves. We're teaching ourselves how to take care of ourselves so that we don't, unconsciously send these harmful messages.
Yeah, I love that. Reparenting yourself and looking back on what we don't want to perpetuate and what we want to stop at this generation so that, we give our children kind of a leg up on the next step. After reading your book, I texted my mom and I was like, Mom, you did so many things right when we were growing up that I feel that I have a leg up when I become a parent just because you were such a good model to me. She really modeled being okay with emotions and working through our emotions. And she was always questioning us about how we were feeling and would ask us, well, what do you think is the next right step for you rather than telling us what to do, which, I think helped me become a well-balanced adult. So I'm looking forward to being able to pass that on.
You're very fortunate. I mean, that's really unusual.
I know, right? I know.
Really beautiful. I'm glad.
Yeah, I was very lucky. I have awesome parents. So I have a friend that has 2 kids and she listens to your podcast. So I texted her this weekend and said, I'm going to be interviewing the Mindful Mama. Do you have any questions for her? So here's a question that she has for you, my friend Chelsea. So she has a 4.5-year-old and a 1.5-year-old. And what she's struggling right now with is that she found that when she had just the one child, it was easier for her to kind of take care of that one child, recognize their feelings, being able to help them work through feelings. But now that she has 2 kids, it's a little bit harder when it comes to conflict between the children, and that she kind of is that at this point feeling like it's hard to not have her eyes on them at all times because then sometimes conflicts arise and she wants to make sure no one gets hurt and everyone's safe, but there has to be that balance there. So you talk a little bit about conflict resolution in your book, Between Siblings. So what advice would you have for a parent that is parenting mindfully but struggling once there's 2 kids in the mix now?
Well, Chelsea, I mean, that's such a hard time. Like, you are so in the thick of it, and it's really, really challenging. It's important to remember that conflict is really normal, that the research shows that kids on average have conflict about once an hour, siblings. So that's
a lot.
That's totally normal. And so sometimes we think as parents that, like when we have an infant, our job is to meet all of their needs because they're underdeveloped. They can't do any, you know what I mean? Our species is underdeveloped when they come out of the womb. They can't even see, right? But as our kids get older, that's not the case. Like, our job is not to make sure their every need is met. They're going to go through life and they're going to have needs that aren't being met. So that 4.5-year-old is going to have this annoying little brother or sister that is doing some annoying things to them and it is not going their way and they are going to be unhappy about it. And that's all totally fine and totally okay. So we just want to get ourselves first into that mindset of, that your children are going to have their own problems. And it is not your job to solve all of your child's problems. It's not your job. You don't want to raise a child where you have solved every single problem from theirs, from birth till, they will be a handicapped, in the truest sense of that word, person, and they will be, a fragile little teacup that can't handle life. So we don't want that, right? So we got to be okay with our kids having their own feelings, their own upset feelings. And as far as it goes, so part of this goes back to, you're not going to be able to solve all the problems. You shouldn't have to. And you know, yes, you want to keep them safe, especially like physically safe. And you are only one person. So, there's a lot of things there, but with the siblings, what I would encourage you is when you have to intervene, if you have to, I invite you to think of yourself more as a mediator rather than the judge and the jury. So a coach, you translate your child's unskillful language into some skillful language. He did this, I hate it, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so what I'm hearing your brother say is that he's really upset when you take his truck. And okay, let me hear it. So you might have to kind of listen to both sides. So I guess I'm kind of inviting you, Chelsea, to give yourself permission to step away, to let some things happen, let the conflict happen, as long as people are not, as long as your children are not, impaling each other, and keep them safe if they are impaling each other. So, like, don't let them hurt each other. Do step in when you need to, and be a mediator, and give yourself permission to not be in the middle of every single conflict they have. So that's the short answer to that long question.
That's really good. And I think that can be really alleviating to just hear that it's okay when siblings have conflict. I know after I read that statistic in your book about how siblings on average have conflicts once every hour, I screenshotted that and sent it to my mom as well, because I have two younger brothers who were just fought like cats and dogs growing up, and my mom tried all the things to help them get along better, and they just didn't. But now that they're adults, they're like best friends, and my mom's always just floored that their relationship turned out so well after, years of them just always being against each other. So there was a light at the end of the tunnel. So I think it was very helpful for her to learn that was actually normal for them to fight like that when they were growing up.
It's a good thing to offer to your friend. And I also want to add to what I said is that our children, especially very small children, regulate their emotions through us. So all of those things that we talked about in the beginning, habits that study the heart, the mind, and the nervous system, understanding your triggers, self-compassion, all that work is really important in situations like this, where you want to go in and be that grounding presence, where you have a volatile situation between two little people. So you want to be that grounding presence. You want to be solid like a mountain, and have practices to help you to be that grounding presence. And sometimes just being there and being that grounding, loving presence, accepting those big feelings without even saying a word, that can be enough.
That's beautiful. Well, thank you so much for everything you've shared today. I think it's going to be very helpful for our listeners, whether they're parents or not. As long as you're interacting with little ones, I think a lot of the things that you shared today can be very helpful. So I'm sure our listeners are going to want to follow you and learn more from you after this episode. What's the best way for them to connect with you?
Well, you can listen to the Mindful Mama podcast. We have over 260 episodes, and everywhere you're listening to this beautiful podcast. And you can find Raising Good Humans wherever books are. And all of this is at mindfulmamamentor.com. You can learn more, and I'm happy to connect.
Awesome. And we'll link all of that in the show notes as well to make it easy for people to connect with you. Well, thank you again so much, Hunter.
Thank you so much, Kaylee. It's been a pleasure.
All right. I really enjoyed doing that interview with Hunter. I hope that you enjoyed it too and that you got some great takeaways. This is the first time that we've had an episode that was really dedicated to parenting. So we would love to hear, did you enjoy this? Would you like us to talk more about parenting on the show? If you did, connect with us on Instagram and let us know. Just send us a DM. So you can find us on Instagram at educalm. That's EDUCALME. All right, if you got value from this episode, if you enjoyed it, please share it with a friend or a colleague or someone that you think would enjoy it too. Have a fantastic week. We appreciate you.